Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let's discuss Python programming. Now, Python is a very popular programming language that is more like English language. For example, it's not as cryptic as C language or JavaScript. It's quite simple to understand, and let's learn Python. So now let's begin with a simple Python file. Now, every Python file ends with the extension .py. So let me create a folder, lecture 1 and hello.py. So now the moment I add this .py to the name, you can see my code editor, in this case, which is VS Code, tends to understand that this is a Python code. Now let's go ahead and just print hello world, for example. So now print hello world. Now this is the simplest thing you can do with your Python code. So let's see how this works out. So now if you are running on a Windows device and after you install Python, you run Python and then the name of your file, which is hello.py. Or if you're running on a MacBook device or a Linux device, you have to use Python 3, which is what I'll use in my case. Okay, oh yeah, I'm not in the right directory, so let me cd lecture 1. Now Python 3 hello.py. Now you can see we have hello world. Whenever I run my code, I receive the same thing, hello world. So this is a very simple Python code. And now let me explain how this works. So this prints is a function in Python, a built-in function, which means someone somewhere, when they developed the Python language, decided to write a function which is called print that enables us to provide inputs. Like in this case, we have the hello world as our inputs to the function. Now each function can take in no inputs, or depending on how you design a function, you can choose that a function needs no inputs or it needs some inputs. Now the input is called the argument. So now in this case, we provided hello world as an argument to the print function. Now the print function enables us to print into the terminal, right? So now you can see whenever we run our code, we can see the hello world, which is the argument to the function, printed out for us. So whenever I run this code, I'll be receiving the same output because I told it to print hello world. So now we can print a variety of other things with our print function. We can say a, basically anything you provide in there would be printed. Now you can also print numbers without the quotes. Now whenever you're trying to print a string or a text, you have to use the single or double quotes. Let me use the single quote so you can see that also works. So single quotes, hello. Now when I run my code again, you can see we have hello, so that works fine. So single or double quotes, depending on what you want, any of it works fine. So now you can also print numbers really without actually having to put them in single or double quotes. We have 1. But now when I try to put a string in here, it won't work because that's just wrong. Now you can see we have an error. So let's go ahead and learn a few things we could do with the print function. Now before we go ahead and do that, let's learn about variables. Now a variable is like a container that enables you to store data. For example, you have, let's say you're trying to store water, for example, use a cup. You're trying to store grains, use a bigger container like a can. So now we have different types of variables for different types of data. Now the type of variable you use to store a number, for example, is called an integer. Let me just put that in somewhere here. So integer, just short for integer is int, to store numbers. Now we have the string. We have the string to store a sentence, for example, or words or sentences. We have the floats. Now this float is used to store numbers that have the decimal points, like 3.2, like 4.5, things like that. So to store decimal numbers. We have a lot of others. We have the char, which is to store a single character. So we can say to stores a single character or letter. So we have several others. We have the long. We have different types of of variable types. It's very plenty, to be honest, but we'll be just looking at this few in this lecture. So now the int is used to store numbers, the string for sentences or words, float for decimal points numbers, and char for the single characters or letters. Now, in languages like C language or JavaScript, you have to define the type of your variable. But in Python, our life is a little bit easier. Python automatically figures out what type of variable to use to store your data. So let's say in a language like C, I would have to do something like this. Int a or int num equals 5 or 7. Now this is what I will have to do in a language like C language. But in Python, you don't have to do the ints. You just have to say num equals 6. So now in this line 6, I have automatically created a variable, and I have stored in that variable the number 6. So now whenever in the rest of my code, whenever I like provide the variable num, num, it automatically means in this place I want to put the letter 6, the number 6. So that's basically how it works. I now have a variable, which is a container for storing data, that stores the data, which is a number, and the number is 6. So now let's see what we can do with our print function and this variable. So let me say num in this case. Now let me run my code again, python hello.py. You see we have 6, but we didn't necessarily print 6. What we did was print the variable num, but now see, as I said, we have a variable that stores a number. So the variable stores the number 6, and the print function goes ahead, checks the variable and tries to see what it contains. Then it discovers that, okay, this variable contains the number 6, and then it prints out the contents of the variable. So that's how the print function works. When you print any variable or any word without the single or double quotes, Python assumes that this thing you're trying to print is a variable. So it goes ahead and tries to check the variable for what it contains. So now the reason we had an error before when we tried something like this was because we did not have the variable. Now when I run my code again, now you can see, let's learn how to debug in this case now. Trace back, file. Now this is an error really. So now it can tell us, Python tells us that we have an error, right? And the error is coming from this file, which is the home herdope. It shows the path to my file, which is the hello.py file. Now you can see it's also telling us in line 6. So now the error is coming from this line. We already know that. Now you can see the error, name error. That is the type of the error. Now you can see we have name error. The name num is not defined. So now you can see it's telling us that, okay, you are trying to use a variable that is not defined, that is not existing. That's what's causing the error. So let me go ahead and change this back. So we have num equals 6, run our code, works fine. Let me change num to 10. It still works fine. So that works fine. But what if we have a string in this case? What happens? It will all be the same. Hello Dave. Now you can see when you print num, it prints hello Dave. So no matter the type of variable that it is, the print function automatically prints it out. Whatever it contains, either it's a floating point value or a string or a character, it all works fine. But what happens when we want to print multiple things in our print function, like multiple variables? Or we want to print a variable alongside a string of text. Now let's see how that works. So let's say I want, let me change this back to a number. Let's say 17. Well, now let's change the variable to messages. Or no, I don't want that. Let's change this also to messages. So let's say in this context, we are trying to like tell a user that you have this number of unread messages. So let's see how we can work about that. So let's say first put our codes and say you have, let me just put brackets here for a placeholder unread messages. So our goal here, let me run my code. We have, right, this works fine. But our goal here is to input a number, right, which is the number of messages in the place of these brackets. So we want to like dynamically include a number, like you have 10 messages or you have 50 messages, depending on the number stored inside the variable messages. So now to do that, what we do is called a format string. Now we can put F before this quotes, the single quotes, the double quotes in this case, for example. Then we can put the brackets, and now we would say messages. So this is how it works in Python. When you want to print a string and then insert a variable inside of it, you use a format string. That is the F before we have the quotes, which is the words that we want to print. Now we use the brackets to like provide the variable. So let's see what happens when I run my code now. You have 1700 messages. If I change messages to 12, that still works fine because it's dynamic. So no matter what is inside of the variable messages, it automatically printed for us inside of this variable. So now there's one other way you can do this. You can use print, same print function. You have curly braces, messages unread messages. So now here I'll use dots formats. No. Okay. Dot formats and then messages. Okay, I got that wrong a little. No. Yeah. So now when I run my code again, we will have two of the same type of response. So here you can see I did something different, right? I said you have, then I put empty curly braces. I didn't put the messages inside of it in this case. But instead of that, I put the messages in a dot format outside of the string, outside of the sentence I was trying to print. So this is a different way you can like print or format your string in Python. So you can use the dot format and then provide the variable name. So now when Python is running, it goes ahead and checks this variable and then inserts it back to this place for us. So that's how this basically works. So now you can also add multiple variables. Let's say we have missed. Okay, missed calls equals Dave. Now let me just remove this. We don't need this for now, or just comment it out. Now using the hash before any line of code in Python automatically changes it into a comment, which means this line will be ignored by our Python interpreter. So whenever you put the hash or the pound, in this case, which is the hash logo or the hash sign, before any line of code in Python, it's automatically ignored. It won't run to be ignored by the interpreter. So now I've ignored this line of code, line 12. So now let's say I want to print this and then also you miss a call from missed calls. So now when I run my code again, you have 1200 messages and you missed a call from Dave. So now we can see this is beginning to make some actual sense. All right, so we've learned about variables, print functions, and arguments. Let's go ahead and learn about some more different things. Let's learn about if conditions. So let me create a new file, conditions.py. Now let's imagine that we want to have some sense of comparison. We're trying to compare or check if something is right or wrong. How do we do that in Python programming? It's called a conditional statement. So let's say we have a variable, let's say name equals James, and then we want to check if the name equals James, then we actually say something. Or let's just say person equals James. So now I want to check if the name of this person is James, we want to say something, but if it's not James, we want to say something else. So let's see how we can work with that. So if condition begins with the if, then person, or let's just do this for example, person equals James, print hello James. So now what is really happening here? Before we go into that, let's see if this works. In fact, so let me run Python 3 conditions dot py. Now we can see hello James. So now it's compared and checked if the name of this person equals James, then it goes ahead and prints hello James. But how is this working? Now we created a variable James, which is the person, and then stored James in the first line. But what is going on in this line? Here we have an if condition. So any statements that begin with the if in Python is called an if condition. So now here we said if, but now this is the statement. We said if person, which is the variable that we're trying to compare, equals means we are trying to ask a question. Does what is on the left, which is the person, equals what is on the right? So now here we are saying if this person, which is currently James, equals James. So we are asking a question here really, that does A equals B, does the first one, person, equals James? And now this will return true because really the person is storing the variable James. So now if the person equals James, to say true, so then if it's true, it goes ahead and prints this line. Now always remember to indent your code properly in Python. Python does not use curly braces to align code, it uses indentation. So when you have a wrong indentation, you'll be having errors in your code. So now this space, the four spaces here, which is same thing as a tab, is called indentation in Python programming. So now let's say we check if person equals James, then print hello James. But let's say something else. So else print hello, what's your name? So now let's run the code first and see what happens. So hello James, but now let's see if I change this James to something else like John, what happens? You can see hello, what's your name? So what happened here again? It's checked if the person is the same thing, if it equals James, then it will return false because person now is John and not James. So then if it returns false, it goes ahead to this else condition. So what this means is if this equals true, do this. Otherwise, if it is not true, go ahead and do this line of code, right? So that works fine. So let's see something else about this. So let's say else or elif person equals John, prints hello John. Now let's put the else again, else prints hello, what's your name? Now let's go ahead and see what happens now. You can see hello John. So now in this first block, it's checked if person equals James. That would return false because person is John, not James. So then this one checks again, but it doesn't work if this one already worked. So if this if condition already returned true, it would ignore the rest of the code, so ignore all of this. But then if this returns false, it goes ahead and checks this block. Now in this block we have the else and the if, so it's called the elif. So it works only if this one returns false, the first block returns false. Now it checks if the person equals John, then it prints hello John. So that's really how this works, quite simple. So let's learn about loops. Now a loop is a way for you to do a simple task multiple times in programming. So let's say loops.py. So now a loop enables you to run a task or a few set of commands multiple times in programming. So let's learn how loops work. So let's say I want to print greeting or greets equals hey there. Let's say I want to print the content of the greets variable 20 times. Now I could go ahead and do this, print greets. I want to do that again. Let me go ahead and copy. Now I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I already have this 5 times. So when I run my code, Python loops.py, Python 3, sorry. Now you can see I have a there 5 times. Now this works fine, there are no errors, but it's redundant, it's not efficient. Now whenever you find yourself in programming, when you're writing the same line of code multiple times, it's just wrong. You should find a way around it. So instead of writing prints like 5 times because I want to do it 5 times, I should instead use a for loop, or a loop in this case, just any type of loop. So now there are different types of loop in Python programming. There's the for loop, there's the while loop, there's the do while loop. So let's talk about those loops now. So here we have the for, I in range 10, prints great. Now let's go ahead and see what happens when I run my code again. Now you see we have hello there printed 10 times. Now you can see I only wrote the print function once, but what happens in this line is I said for, which is the beginning of a for loop. Now I in range 10 simply means I want you to repeat whatever is below this indentation 10 times. Whatever number I put here, if I put 15, to repeat it 15 times. That's basically how it works. So to go ahead and do this line 15 times. So if I add any other line of code here, and I say print hi, so this would also be run 10 times or whatever times I provide here. So let's see if that's actually true. So now you can see here there hi, here there hi. So that works fine. So now we can run a set of commands or lines of code multiple times using loops. So let's learn one other type of loop. Let's learn the do while loop, or the while and do while loop. Now this is also one other way of commenting your code in Python. When you want to comment multiple lines simultaneously, you can use this triple double quotes at the beginning of your comment and at the end of your comment. So this will be ignored by Python interpreter when you're running your code. So let's learn about the while loop. Now, before we can use a while loop, we need a condition. Now, a while loop works with the condition. So let's say we have the count, which is a variable to keep track of the number of times that we've done something. So let's say count equals 0. Now, while count less than 9 prints hi. So what I'm trying to do here is I want to print the word hi 9 times. So let's see what happens when I run my code now. Let's say Python loops.py, we have hi. Well, now what is going on here? We have what is called an infinite loop. So this will continue to run for as long as the kingdom comes. It will not stop. So I have to stop it. When you run into an infinite loop in your code, what you do is type the control button and then C. So that would stop. So do that whenever you're in an infinite loop, or whenever you want to stop your code from running. Just run command or control C. So now let's see what is going on here. So now I said in this place, we have to use the while loop with a condition. Now in this case, I said while count is less than 9. So what this means is, as long as the variable count is less than the number 9, I want you to continue doing this forever. But now, because the variable count will continue to be less than 9 at all times, it will remain, it's 0, so it's always less than 9. So it means this code will continue to run and run and run forever. So let's go ahead and see how we can change this and make it stop after getting to the 9 threshold. So now we can say count plus equals 1. So let me run my code again and see what happens. Now you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that works fine. So what we are doing here is, as the same as before, I said if count equals if count less than 9. So as long as the count variable is less than the 9, it's continuing to run this line of code. But then at the end of that line, of that block, I said count plus equals 1. So this is the same thing as saying I want to increase the variable count by 1. I want to increase. So now at the end of each run, count will be adding 1. So when the first loop goes around, I print I, count will become 1. I print I again, count to become 2, then all the way to 9. When it gets to 9, it stops because count is no longer less than 9. That's how this works. So now let's we've learned about print functions, conditions, and then also loops. So now let's learn how to write our very own function. Now let's go ahead and say a new file, functions.py. Now a function enables you to basically automate a few commands or a few actions. Now if you're trying to like achieve a specific action in your code, you're trying to like, let's say, do a computation, for example, you're trying to achieve something, but then you realize you have to do that thing multiple times. You should use a function to make your code more efficient. So now to create a function in Python programming, you have to use a def. Now this def is a keyword for defining a function. So let's say def add, then you like provide this, which is the quotes, the brackets, for in this case parentheses. Now this is the standard way of defining a function. You provide this is the name of your function, and then this is just like required for it to work. Now let's say you want to just print add. Now let me go ahead and write subnormal code. I've defined the function, right? And I said that function, whenever it is run, it needs to print the word add. Now let's see what happens when I do this. Now Python 3 function .py. Now you can see we have add was printed. Well, basically what's really going on under the hood. So now here we have the function defined, and then whenever we run this function, it should print the word add. But then here we call the function. Whenever you like use the keyword of a function and then the brackets, you are basically calling that function. You're telling that function to run. Like, I want you to execute the commands that is inside of this function. So that's basically what's happening here. So if I say this to ADDI and adding, and when I run this again, we have adding printed. So basically anything that is inside of this block of code will be run whenever I run the add function. So let's say print called function. Now when I run this again, we have called function. So basically any code that you write under this block is considered a part of this function, and then to be run when you call the function. But now let's learn how to add arguments to our functions. Now an argument is a value that you pass into a function when you run it. So let's say here we have a as an argument. So you can call it anything basically. Let's let us try this, for example. Now let's say add and then 1. So in this case, let's print a instead of just printing a random value. So print a. So now whenever I run my code now, I see 1. If I change this to 2, I see 2. If I change this to 3, come on, I see 3. So that works fine. So now whenever you pass in a value like this as an argument to your function will receive it and then do whatever you want with it. So in this case, I'm just printing the number. What if you want multiple arguments for a function? Then you use a comma and then the name of the second value. But in my case, I don't want to use a anymore. I can use num and then num2. So now I want 2 numbers, right? So I can add those numbers. So now what do I do to add a number? Let's see what we can do. So yes, let's say print num plus num2. So this is the same thing as adding the values inside of num1, instead of the first number and the second number. So let's see what happens here now. Let me add a second value, which is 6. Now when I run my code, we have 9. So 3 plus 6 actually is 9. So let's go ahead and say 4, 9. Yeah, we should have 13. So that works fine. But so this is called an arithmetic operation. Here we added 2 numbers and we are printing out the result using the print function. So now let's say we want to actually store the addition inside of a variable. So you can say here addition equals num plus num2. So now this addition now would now store the value that comes out of this arithmetic operation. Here we added the numbers. Well, now we are saying this variable addition should store the output of that operation. Now when I print addition, we have the same value, which is the sum of those two numbers. Now when I run my code again, we have 13. Provide any other values, it will work fine. And here we have 465, which is correct. So this is how you define a function and provide arguments in Python programming. So thank you for watching. Please like my video and subscribe, and watch out for the next video. Thank you everyone. Goodbye.